So Vish, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, Casey, thank you for having me. I'm excited to have a conversation on such a variety of topics, all compressed into one discussion.
I know I feel like we need like 10 episodes to talk about all the things that you basically wrote about in your book, right? That are really resonating with me. So first I got to say thank you to Kathy who got me the book, who you know well, right? And in reading it, I'm like, all right, I have to reach out to Vish and we got to connect because there's so much great content here that, especially now with everything that's happening in the world, it's so important to really connect with ourselves, right, and to something beyond ourselves, really ultimately what it comes down to. And I've personally been sitting here in this spot for many hours every single day, and it's so easy to continue to work and work and work and get out of balance, so to speak. And your book has, I used to think differently about balance, right? I always said, well, there's no such thing as balance. You teeter totter one way or the other. But your book has given me a new definition for balance, which I'll get into. But for now, let me give a quick intro to who Vish is. And so Vish Chatterji, am I pronouncing your last name right?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
Chatterji.
Anyways, Vish was born in the bustling city of Hong Kong to Indian parents, and he came to America to study engineering and then pursued a career in engineering and business before becoming a successful tech entrepreneur in California, where he currently resides. Throughout his 20 years in corporate America, he studied and practiced yoga, meditation, and Ayurveda as a way to stay balanced as a leader. He now coaches business leaders in the East meets West approach to help more of their greatness show up at work. And Vish has a degree in mechanical engineering from Northwestern University and a master's in business administration from the University of Michigan. He's also a certified executive coach, yoga teacher, meditation instructor, and Vedic counselor. So Vish is very well versed in many different areas, hence why I wanted to have him here. And let's start with, what does a typical day look for you now, Vish? What is it? and maybe share a little bit about what it was before you started to find this balance and pull out all of these other powers that you had.
All right. Well, before I do that, I will add one thing to my bio, that when I left Hong Kong, I actually moved to Canada. So I do have a
Oh,
connection to the great North Country from where I am now. But we moved from Canada and settled in Toronto. So I lived in Toronto, in St. Catharines, and I've been to Ottawa many times as well. Since my yoga teacher and co-author of the book lived in Ottawa for a long time, Yoga Rishi Vishwaketu. So even though I'm sitting in Redondo Beach, California, which is a suburb of Los Angeles, on a 85-degree sunny day, I have endured many a cold Midwestern and Canadian winter. So I do relate. So what was my day? What was my life like in the working? So I worked in corporate America for most of my career. So I was an engineer in the auto industry in Detroit. And I obviously, when I lived in Detroit, I was crossing the border quite a lot into Ontario. And those were very stressful years where I had a yoga practice, but it wasn't a big part of my life. And so I was an engineer. I was a business executive. I went to business school and then joined the executive ranks of the auto industry. Then I worked in the tech industry. And I always had these times, like you mentioned, Casey, of teeter-tottering, where life would get so busy and so out of control. And I'd be working, I'd get to the office at 7 in the morning and I'd be there till 8 or 9 at night. And I'd come home, I'd eat a little bit of food, go to bed and do it all over again. And I would drop all these practices when things got busy. I was like, well, there's so much work to do. I got to focus on the work. I'm going to forego yoga, meditation for that little bit of time. And I think what's changed, especially as I started my own business over the last few years and I've gone deeper into understanding these tools for balance, that balance isn't just about how do I recover and stay less stressful. It's actually about performance. So that's when it sort of clicked for me that if I keep a regular, good, solid practice on a daily basis in the morning, whatever that practice is, it actually improves my performance. And so I'm able to do more in a shorter amount of time. I'm able to do it with a lot more calm and poise. And I don't get as rattled when challenges come up as I used to. How many times in the old days, something crazy would happen at work and it would just set me off. And I would, was trying to get things done, but it wasn't as efficient or as in flow. Or I'd talk to a customer and it turned into an argument. Whereas now I'm just a lot more aware. So I think the idea of being conscious and being aware and being balanced is actually a productivity tool to get more output out of your business and your work life. So that's, I think, the big shift in my life now is I tend towards more balance. And when the going gets tough, I stick with the practice instead of dropping it.
Yeah, so I'll share actually how that came up to you. But what does a day look like for you now to help you maintain that balance?
So I get up, I typically try to get up before 6 o'clock. And I talked about in the book that there's a very special period of time in the morning that is conducive to waking up and staying alert throughout the day. And typically, if you get up before 6 a.m., you're going to be more energized throughout the whole day. And I've tested getting up at 5:55 and at 6:05, and it actually makes a difference. If you do it for
Oh,
3 days,
really?
you notice a difference. So there's this idea, Robin Sharma, this actually Canadian teacher of spiritual wisdom, he wrote a book called The 5 a.m. Club, and how high performing people get up at that 5 a.m. hour. And that's really connected to the ancient wisdom of the yoga tradition that you get up before 6. There's a lot of energy that comes into your day. So I usually get up about 5:30 to 5:45. And I first thing go to the bathroom, shower up, take care of my morning business. And then I start my yoga practice. And I usually sit down and I do some chanting exercise, kind of voice work, sound work. I do some breathing techniques to sort of energize and cleanse the breath system. I do some yoga asanas, which is actually physical practice of yoga. And then I usually sit for about a 30-minute meditation. And then I close up my practice. And then I usually sit with my wife and have a cup of tea, sit with the kids and have breakfast. And then by 8:30, I usually start my work day. And my work day is, it varies. I mean, pre-COVID days, I was on the road a lot, traveling to different clients, to their business, helping them with their, with coaching. And lately it's all been in this office, actually, where I've been doing a lot of work over Zoom. So I'll see clients throughout the day. I usually see 3 to 4 clients in a typical day. And then in between, I'm doing administrative work and responding to client queries. Trying to do a little bit of social media. That's been a new area and a challenge for me, but try and dedicate time towards that. And then I usually try to wind my workday by around 6:30 or 7. And then, try and get a walk in or a bike ride or a run, and then sit down with the family for dinner and relax the evening. And I usually try to be lights out by about 10:30. That's the goal. Netflix can sometimes interfere with that, but I try to 10:30 lights out if I can.
So do you have a practice that you do in the evening as well, or is it just the morning?
Just the morning. The morning is my main practice. If I'm going through a very stressful period of life, sometimes at the end of the workday, I'll spend a little bit of time and do some journaling or get a walk in. And I do know that when I have a client interaction at the end of a client session, I usually go for about a 10-15 minute walk just to kind of clear my head, get some fresh air. I
Mm-hmm.
love being outside and outdoors. And even when I worked in an office environment, after meetings, I'd usually take a 10-minute walk around the building. Or if I can negotiate the person I'm having meetings with, negotiate with them to walk together and have a walking meeting. So I've got some work now where I meet people and sometimes we'll say, let's make it a walking meeting, and we'll walk for an hour and
Yeah.
have a meeting in a walking format.
Yeah. Such a great idea. For myself, I've been really good with keep maintaining routines and especially over the past several years now, I've been tweaking it and figuring out what works, what doesn't work, that sort of thing. But what really helped me, and when I was reading your book, was when you started to get into doshas and understanding that, right? And having one that is kind of your dominant dosha, and correct me if I'm using like wrong terms or anywhere, right? So, but understanding that you have one dominant one and that you tend to lean towards that thing, but it can start to overflow. So that's where you start to become out of balance. And when things start to become out of balance, things start to show up like getting frustrated more easily. And that's one that I would tend to lean towards, is that I'm a lot better now without even realizing, but now I'm even more aware of triggers. But in the past, like that was I had a temper, and mostly I get frustrated at myself that when I make a mistake or something like that, right? But what I've started to realize is that if I start to get frustrated at something that typically, well, shouldn't or wouldn't in under normal circumstances, then I've now realized that, okay, I'm out of balance somewhere. What do I need? And I started to ask myself that question, and I've been able to get out of that state of mind a lot quicker now and rebalance myself and get myself back into a good state of mind. And one of the examples was I actually, and I shared this when I went on live actually for Union on Monday. I was also sharing your book. I was off. I think I'd just been working too much. I'm like, you know what? I just need to relax, right? So I was thinking of the pitta, and I'm like, all right, I need to do something that's not like that's not super active or competitive, right? And get that part of me going. I just need to relax. So I like gave myself permission to just sit down on the couch and watch a full movie with my son without kind of doing something else. And after that, I was energized, right? I actually sat down, watched a movie, and after that, I was ready to go again and take on the world. But that awareness was what it came to. So now I have a new appreciation for balance and the word balance.
Well, Casey, first off, the way you just explained it was so articulate, and you clearly understood the teachings that I was trying to share in the book. So, huge kudos to you for understanding and incorporating it into your life. And I'm feeling quite proud because I must have explained something right.
No, you did. There's a ton of information in there, and it is like, it's obviously there's a lot in there, but it reads really easily, right? So
Good.
like I've been able to, I do have some knowledge of this stuff, but I've been able to really connect and really understand the way you've written it. So thank you.
It's complicated stuff. I mean, it really is. And I think, the subject you're talking about is called Ayurveda. And Ayurveda is a sister science to yoga. There's a yoga system, which is how to take care of your, moving your body in a physical way, breath exercises, meditation work. And one of the sister sciences to it is Ayurveda, which is what is the right diet, what is the right lifestyle, what is the right timing of day, what are the right foods to eat, and when to eat those foods. And that whole system is based on understanding what is your unique mind-body constitution. So that's kind of the cornerstone of Ayurveda, is being aware of what element in you is more predominant, and based on that, trying to balance that. And so, like you, I have this pitta tendency. The three elements are basically, it's vata, pitta, and kapha, the three, what they call doshas. And the word dosha means sort of your tendency towards imbalance. And as a very simple explanation, vata is the airy element, people who are very airy and super creative but can't sit still. Pitta is the fire element, people who are like, get it done, got to get the job done, and get angry and frustrated and critical if it doesn't work out. And kapha is sort of the earth element, where you just sort of, you're a little bit more relaxed, more laid back, not as quick to action, but once you get going, you have a stamina to keep going. And so we all have a bit of vata, pitta, kapha. We all have a bit of fire and earth and water element, fire, air, and earth element. But if one is out of balance, that's when life gets out of balance, and it starts to show up as disease. So I wrote about this in the book, but there was a time when, I was a hard driving, hard charging corporate executive in the tech industry, driving a team of engineers to build the perfect tech gadget. And, I had very, very difficult numbers that I had to hit, revenue numbers and revenue targets for the business. And so I was successfully hitting the numbers. I was getting my bonuses. And so I was feeling quite proud of myself, like I'm doing a good job. And so my boss calls me in for my, quarterly review. And he said, Vish, you're doing a great job, but, you're just like, you're upsetting everybody. Like you're so hard on people. Like, at the end of your meetings, people leave the room crying and in tears. You can't just keep people like, you can't be so hard on them. Like, lighten up a little bit on them. And I sort of looked at him, and I felt like insulted to my core. I'm like, look, you gave me these crazy financial targets to hit. I hit the numbers. I brought in the revenue. I brought in the profit. Because of that, these people are now employed and can continue to be employed. And now you're telling me I got to sit with them and hold their hand and kumbaya and hit the numbers? It doesn't work that way. You get one or the other. We either hit the numbers, or we're all going to sing songs and I'll get fired at the end of it. And so he's like, look, this is the next step in your leadership journey. So I was devastated. I came home, of course, told my wife, like, what the hell? All these people are crazy. They want me to be nice to everybody. It's this California culture. I can't deal with it. Back in Detroit, you could throw a plate across the room and get away with it. And so I poured myself a whiskey. I sat down in my armchair and I looked on the bookshelf, and I came across a book that had been sitting collecting dust for years on Ayurveda. And Ayurveda is one of those things that I'd looked at before and thought, this is boring, dry, medical stuff. How does it really apply to me? But that night, for whatever reason, that book spoke to me. I pulled it out, I started reading it, and it started describing Pitta, for instance. You know, easily flustered, loses their temper, yells and screams at people, should avoid drinking hard spirits. I'm like, what? Should avoid red meat. I'm like, oh man, I just had steak for dinner. Like, it's just all these things, like one by one, were behaviors that I was indulging in that were aggravating a pre-existing disposition that I had. And that's when I started to realize, like, I need to cool down. You know, very simply, if I have a lot of pitta and fire element, I'm getting very critical and very judgmental and very hard on people and very task oriented. If I can cool that down, things may change. And so I started doing more cooling activities. I started swimming, I started gardening, I started doing a lot more cycling. I started eating cooler foods. So I started avoiding red meat, switching more to seafood. And now I'm vegetarian, but at the time I used to eat meat. And so I switched to more whiter meats. I started drinking white wine instead of red wine. I started cutting out spirits. You know, beer was one of those things that was okay for Pitta. And I noticed literally within 2 or 3 weeks of a little bit of a lifestyle shift, I literally started cooling down. I was losing my temper less. I was getting less frustrated, and people were getting along. And sure enough, the next quarter came by, still hit the numbers, but with a lot more camaraderie and collaboration within the team and less tears, basically.
Yeah.
And that's when it clicked for me that, you know, Ayurveda can also be a business performance tool along with yoga.
Yeah. So you can have both. You don't need, it's not tears or the numbers.
Yes.
Or no
And
tears or
black
the
and
numbers.
white way of looking at the world is a pitta thing.
Yeah.
It's either black or white. It's either, you know, left or right. There's no in between.
So one of the words that you mentioned when you're describing that was science. That's another word that I never really associated with this Ayurveda world, right?
Mhm.
So can you explain that a little bit? Like, how is this a science in, as how we think of science here in Western civilization, right?
So they were all considered. So, you know, yoga was considered a science. Ayurveda, very specifically, was considered the science of living. But it wasn't like, you know, in today's science, we try to measure everything, right? I was trained as an engineer, so we measure. You try something out and you see, is it going to work, right? You run tests. And so that's sort of where I notice an intersection between the science thinking and a lot of these traditions of the ancient Indian wisdom tradition is you got to try them out and see if they work for you, right? So when somebody takes the questionnaire that I put in the book, for instance, most people are like, oh my God, that totally is me. You know, yes, I'm the one who's Vata and always putting a scarf on and telling them to turn the temperature up when everybody else around me feels just perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
So people read it and they're like, you know what, that makes sense. That applies to my life. And then I ask people, hey, have you met the type A personality, right? And they're like, oh yeah, I know that person. They describe them and it perfectly describes a pitta. So that is a small micro experiment that you can do to say, okay, do these 3 categorizations make sense? Do I see these 3 categorizations in the world around me? And then if I am falling into one of those and I take some of these lifestyle adjustments, do they work for me? Right. So
Mm-hmm.
I had a client who was, had a bit of a Vata imbalance, and, you know, Vata is excess air element. She was a financial advisor at you know, a large financial institution, and, you know, was having trouble sleeping at night, like insomnia. And insomnia is a very specific Vata, over much air, you know, too much air element in her life. And so I asked her about her lifestyle and her diet, and she was getting up at a very Vata heavy time, and she would drink 5 cups of coffee every morning. And so the caffeine in coffee is very Vata aggravating. So I asked her, I said, you know, is there a way to cut down the coffee to 2 or 3 cups? You don't have to eliminate it, but also add milk and sugar to it, because the milk is a grounding quality. Sugar has a sweetness that's also grounding quality. And again, sugar, there's a whole controversy if sugar is good or bad for you. But in this case, it's a nurturing element for somebody who's got too much air and sort of like flying up, you know, getting too anxious. And the biggest problem in her business was she was losing clients on a pitch call because she was all over the place in her pitch. And so she needed to kind of ground the pitch a little bit to be more focused and more present with that customer. And so she cut the coffee down to 3 cups in the morning instead of 5, adding milk and sugar. And of course, she started to feel more grounded. But then she went to a checkup to her doctor, and the doctor said, hey, your blood pressure just normalized. You don't need to take your blood pressure meds anymore. It's this whole like byproduct that came about it. I was trying to help her solve her business problem, and it ended up solving a health problem as well. Because when you're out of balance in any area, it shows up in your psychology, it shows up in your interaction with your clients and customers. But eventually, if the imbalance is long enough, it starts to show up in your tissues, it starts to show up in your physiology. And so what Ayurveda wants to do is correct the imbalance early enough so it doesn't show up as a full-blown health problem. And in my case, I had 2 bosses in my life that I really, really admired and respected, and both of them had heart attacks. They survived, but they had heart attacks, which is a classic pitta imbalance. You're imbalanced for too long, over too long a period of time. So I know if I continued the way that I was continuing with my diet, my lifestyle, and the type of work I was doing all combined, eventually I would probably end up down with heart issues. And so that's why even for me, it's even more critical from a business point of view and a health point of view to balance these things.
Yeah, and that's what it all comes down to. It's not just one thing, right? It's working with everything. Like there are people who are so stressed about what they eat can actually get sick because they're consistently stressed about it, right? Which isn't good for the body either, right? Having that sort of stress on the body. The One of the things that I'm really connecting with is the fact that this has been around for literally thousands of years, right? It's nothing new. I think that what you find people are studying this might be new, but it's something that has been tried, tested and true. And it's not a strict guideline. Like you must do this. Here's a suggestion. If it works for you, great, continue to do it. If it doesn't, stop doing it. Right.
Yeah,
And
that's
figure out what
right.
does work.
And there's a couple of things. So it's been around for thousands of years, and it was an approach to living that was subjugated as India was conquered by various outside. I mean, the Mughals, the Central Asians ruled over India for a long time. England ruled over India for 300 years or so. And so in all of those times, a lot of these things got subjugated and sort of pushed aside in favor of Western medicine. And Western medicine has its place. I mean, if you're acutely ill and you need a surgery or you need a major intervention, Western medicine is miraculous in its approach. But when you're just a little bit out of balance, Western medicine doesn't really know what to do. What's the right diet for Vata versus Pitta versus Kapha? What's the right diet for different individuals? Western medicine is a one size fits all approach. And so I think what's beautiful about Ayurveda is turning inwards and understanding in a conscious way, who am I? What is different about me? What are my natural propensities and proclivities? And how do I balance those? And if I layer on the type of work that I do, the type of food that I eat, the type of place that I live, the type of family that I'm in, the type of business people I interact with, if you add all those together, it starts to paint a very different picture than just, what is my blood pressure reading right now? Or what is my
Right.
pulse? So, Western doctors sort of looking at your physiology and trying to say, okay, what's wrong with the person? An Ayurvedic doctor is going to ask you probably a half an hour worth of questions about your life. And
Right.
from that, come up with a picture of how your life is out of balance. Now, if you're sick, it's going to be a strict protocol to get back to balance. But if you're just mildly imbalanced, like I don't feel good, I'm just feeling a little off, that's when some subtle modifications can make a difference. And so you try things. Like I couldn't tell this woman, stop drinking coffee. She won't do it. Like it's not going to happen. But reduce it, modify it, adjust it, and all of a sudden it can become healing. And so it's about, and that's part of the work that I do, is how do I fit the teachings of yoga, the teachings of Ayurveda, the teachings of the Vedic system in general to the modern lifestyle, like where it's in a manageable way. Because if it's
Yeah.
not manageable, you're not going to do it, right?
No, exactly. Right. And it's not sustainable. Right. So I always tell people, like, even when we're building sustainable homes, if it's not something that you enjoy, it won't be sustainable. So there's no point in doing it. Right. So no matter what it is. So one of the things that I've also realized is this has helped me understand, like relationships, so obviously more intimately, like my wife and I, right? What I realized is that, okay, well, I'm a Pitta, she's a Vata actually. And we're like the opposites, like where I get frustrated when I get too hot, where she's like just wants to be in the sun and that's all she wants to do. So she's like, when are we moving to California? Right. So, and I'm like, oh, it's too hot there. Right. So, but in either case, it helps me understand that part as well, right? And if you can understand each other, then that relationship actually becomes better. So it's like, okay, I understand what you need now. You can kind of work. Doesn't mean that you have to avoid that stuff, but just be aware of what might happen.
Casey, do you know what the Vata Pitta mix? Pitta is like a fire. It's a fire. It's a fire that can, transform and make things happen. Like Pitta people are people that do things. Vata is air, kind of like a bellows. So when you have Vata,
you just make it the fire
bellows
bigger.
On a
that must be why it works out so well for us. But
that's the thing. If Vata gets out of control, it inflames the fire of Pitta. And if Pitta is too hot, obviously it creates, so they all influence each other. And so as you recognize it, because Pitta in balance is the one who gets things done. It's the one who accomplishes goals. Pitta out of balance ends up burning the whole village down. Right?
That's not what I was trying to do. Yeah.
Yeah, but also Vata in balance is very creative and very sensitive and very aware. And the Vata people are the one who can kind of read a room or read a situation. They have this sensitivity about them. They have an ethereal quality. But Vata out of balance, and they're so ungrounded. Like, I see this in LA. Vata, there are a lot of very creative people that cannot put on any weight. They're just like skin and bones, because that's a Vata condition when they're out of balance, this air element. And all they do is eat raw foods, which aggravates Vata. And they do vinyasa yoga, which is a very moving, flowing form of yoga that aggravates it all. And then they have all these crazy Vata type disorders, like insomnia being one of them, digestive issues, all sorts of stuff that happens because Vata people doing Vata activities, eating Vata food. It's too much air, right? And so a lot of times they're like, but I can't do without my salad. I'll say, okay, then put some oil in it. Like, at least if you put some oil in the salad, you're giving this grounding quality to this airy type of food. But, ideally for Vata, Vata should eat cooked foods, Pitta, eat all the salad you want.
One thing, actually, I'd love to get into yoga a little bit, especially because we're talking, the conscious builder, construction people, it's not cool to do yoga. You don't do that sort of stuff. But you specifically have a story of a construction owner, business owner that you had helped. Do you mind sharing that story, actually, that you shared in the book?
Yeah. So he's a company that does basically massive kitchen and bathroom remodels. So they complete gutting and redo of those two areas specifically, based here in LA. And being in the what I know of the construction business and having hired lots of people in the past in the construction world, you got to deal with some really tough people. And I think there's two pressures. And let me know if it's the same situation in Ottawa, but you've got the workforce that you're hiring to come to the job site, and you've got the client who has all sorts of demands that sometimes keep changing. So
sometimes, no, I'm just kidding.
so you're resonating so far. All right. So, and then you're sort of stuck in the middle, right? You're stuck in the middle of people that don't show up to work, don't show up to the job on time, or do a crappy job, or don't put their full attention into it. And you're trying to deliver a high level of quality to the customer. And meanwhile, the customer said one thing, changes their mind, says something else, sees how it's done, wants it redone, doesn't realize how much, and depending on if you're charging flat or by the hour, it just becomes a mess. And so it's a very, very stressful business. And this particular owner was having all sorts of issues with his health, with stress, working crazy hours, losing his temper on his employees all the time. And of course, the physical burden of the work. I mean, his body hurt. It's physical work. So, and he's on the job site doing the work as well. He's not just, kind of administrating, which I think is the case in a lot of construction businesses. So he had a client of his that suggested, hey, you should think about going to a yoga class. So he's like, yoga? What? And he's this kind of big, burly, tough Hispanic guy. And he's like, why would I go to a yoga class? That's weird, And the client said, look, just try it out. Give it a try. And so he went to a local, yoga studio, and he shows up in the yoga class, and it's all women in Lululemon pants who are extremely flexible. And he's like feeling very awkward in that room. But he gave it a try. He's like, all right, I trust this guy. I'm going to try. And he tried to do the best he could. And, he felt good after the first class. He went a second time. The third time he went, he actually hurt himself because he was competitive, right? He's like, look at all these people. They're all these women. They're bending so perfectly. I'm going to try the same thing. And he ended up hurting himself. And it took him a while to realize that it's not about how far he can, get into a pose. It's just doing the practice. And he found that after about a month of doing yoga on a regular basis, a lot of his body aches started to go away. He was more conscious on the job site with his own body. So, if you're doing a repetitive action over and over, you get so lost in the work, you forget about your body. But when you're practicing yoga, you're like, wait a minute, I've hit a limit here. I need to take a break. So he started taking more breaks for his body. He started to be a lot more calm with his employees. And they started telling him like, wow, you're yelling at us less than you used to. And I resonate with that because I'm like, hey, I've been there. Mine came from the Ayurveda route, but his from the yoga route. He just started to calm down a lot more. And he also found that he was a lot more patient with his customers. And so what was happening is he was getting recommended more, and he was also getting more bids because the presence that he was coming to the negotiation or the meeting was a completely different presence than before. So today, this is now 3 years later, he still practices. I think he goes to a yoga studio about 3 times a week without fail. And he credits his business success based on that becoming a part of his life, both from his body aches and pains, from his aging process, but also dealing with difficult workers that work for him, but also dealing with difficult clients and customers, and also winning more business. So I was like, this is the perfect yoga poster child here.
Yeah. That's like, obviously I can resonate with that story because I've been there dealing with all the same things, been doing yoga and meditation, see that how it affects all aspects of my life, right? It's not just about exercise, it's about actually improving everything. So I love that, to have stories like that, and that you're able to share them, because hopefully it'll inspire other people to at least give it a try, right? And these, I can say the same thing. Like a large part of the success that we're having is because of the practices, the habits that I have with regards to meditation. Yoga is not something I've actually been actively practicing until recently. When I started reading your book, I'm like, all right, I have to get back into this. So I've started doing it actually in the evenings, at least 4 times a week, to end my day. Right. Because I just find, obviously it's easy at home to just keep working. And then you try to sleep after staring at a screen, which doesn't work. Right. So
How long do you practice for, Casey, in the evening?
I do 20 to 30 minutes and maybe sit a little bit longer after that, after the session. So maybe 40 minutes max, right? Kind of depends on when I shut down.
Yeah, I think it doesn't take a lot to sort of reset the body. If you think about it, you eat food all day and all this crud ends up on your teeth, and the recommendation is to brush your teeth for 2 minutes, right? What's 2 minutes? 2 minutes does such a massive cleansing, it prevents your teeth from rotting out.
Right.
It doesn't need a huge amount of time. And, I was, so involved with the yoga community, and they have, an hour and a half yoga practice, hour and a half yoga classes. And I realized that, within a 10, 15-minute window, you can do a lot for your body in terms of healing it from the stress of a day. And you can do a lot within 5, 10 minutes for your mind to heal it from the stresses of a day. So, 15 minutes of body work, 5 minutes of quiet time, or 15, 20, whatever it is. I mean, if you do a practice within, and that's what I recommend in the Business Casual Yogi, again, to make it accessible, is 15-minute practice is the first practice that I described in the book, and then it goes on to a 20 and then a 45-minute, depending on how deep you want to get into it. But 15 minutes every day or every other day is phenomenal, versus 1.5 hours once a week. It doesn't have the same effect. If you brush your teeth once a week, it's not as effective as twice a day.
That's so true. And I started
once a week. It's not going to make up for 2 minutes in the morning, 2 minutes in the evening.
Yeah, I started doing that with workouts too. Like I was, you feel like you have to go do like an hour long workout, but I started doing like 20-minute workouts and they're perfect, right? You work them in after dinner or something like that, or wherever it works into your day. You don't have to try to block off a whole hour. Just do a quick 20-minute workout and a few times a week. And that is more powerful once again than once a week for an hour.
That's right.
Um,
And you're
so
working different aspects, like your cardiovascular workout, your cardio workout, your, weightlifting, all of those things are to exercise the muscles in your body, to exercise your heart muscle, and they keep you overall healthy. The yoga practice is more of a body, on an internal organ level. So you're working out your organs. You're also working your joints, and and which take a lot of strain in the construction business. You're working out your glands and your hormones and regulation of all these different chemicals in your body. You're also calming the mind down, and you're also connecting to that inner awareness and that inner consciousness that we all have. And when I first read about your business and you said, "Look, I'm the conscious builder," I thought, what does conscious mean in construction and building? And as I started to learn about it, it's about understanding the environment that you're in, leveraging the different energies of the environment, like you talked about, when we talked on before this, about how to take advantage of the sun and what time the sun rises and sunsets and what direction you want more heat to come into the home. So consciousness is about just being aware of
mhm.
the environment. And so yoga is a practice specifically to connect you to a deeper level of awareness. And when you're more aware, obviously you choose materials a different way, you choose designs a different way, you choose clients a different way, you choose your response to clients a different way, you choose your response and interaction with employees a different way. So all of a sudden there's awareness. Like you're going to see somebody that works for you and all of a sudden think, I got to ask John this question today because I think something's going on. Hey, John, what's going on? And all of a sudden he opens up about something in his personal life that just need to get off his chest, tell you about, that
Yeah.
had he not done that, he would have messed up the day's work. So you just learn a different way to sort of flow through a day with more awareness and more consciousness and more respect for the people, your clients, your work, your materials, all of it together.
Yourself.
Yeah, and yourself, and more
Yeah.
consciousness for yourself, right? And so that's why it doesn't need an hour and a half practice. 15, 20 minutes on a regular basis, that starts to become your natural way of being.
Let's chat a little bit about something that's actually not in your book, but we were chatting about is Vastu, the architecture, right, and the thinking and science behind that. Can you give us a little bit of background on that, and then I'll share my screen with all of our viewers, and they can see a couple of the plans that we're working on and projects that we've been sharing on our channels, obviously, and maybe we can have a conversation around that thinking versus our thinking now, and see where it leads to.
Yeah, sure. So, a lot of these Vedic sciences have been lost over time. So yoga was sort of lost in a way, and it was revived, and more in the recent century, and of course in the last 20 years or so in the Western world. And now yoga, everybody's doing yoga. There's a yoga studio on every street corner in some areas here in LA. Ayurveda was lost and sort of being rediscovered and sort of coming back and is becoming more talked about in the yoga community, the science of Ayurveda. Vastu is one of those things that has been lost. It's the science of space. It's like the yoga of your space, like how to harness natural energies in your built up space. But it was, a massive body of work that was well understood in ancient India, 5,000 years ago. And so excavations they've done of these ancient cities in India, Mohenjo, Harappa civilizations, these homes and streets and cities were all built in a Vastu type of architecture. And what that meant was these ancient cities from 5,000 years ago had rectangular streets with sewage and drainage systems. And they orient the houses in such a way for the natural prevailing wind to cool the entire home from one side to the other. And so there was a lot of thought given into what is the environment we're in, what are we building in, and how do we build an environment for community to all live in together. They had water tank systems that would then pass fresh water through different homes in certain quadrants of the city. And then of course, sewage flowed a different direction, which didn't come into vogue in the Western world until, this century really. So That got lost along the way. Now, about 3,000 years ago, monks that were traveling into China carried a lot of these teachings into China, and it formed the basis of Feng Shui. Feng Shui, I think, means Feng means wind and Shui means water. It's the understanding of wind and water element. And so Feng Shui developed, and of course that became popularized. And now you can go to a local chapter store in Canada or Barnes and Noble here, and you can buy a book on Feng Shui. But you can't really buy a book on Vastu. It sort of hasn't revived in the same way. There aren't a lot of Western books on it. So it's still a very unknown in the Western world, but it's the precursor to Feng Shui. And the concept of Vastu is, how do we ensure the energies flow in a good way in a particular home that we're either building or living in? And so there's some principles that go with Vastu. And one of the predominant ones is leveraging the cardinal directions. So north, east, south, and west are probably the most important factors. And the idea of rectangles, being aligned with cardinal directions and using rectangles in construction, which is what you see in modern Western homes. You don't see a lot of circular homes. They're usually rectangular. And I think that's sort of carried over somehow over the years. The pyramids of ancient Egypt were influenced by the Vastu system. Obviously, the Taj Mahal and all the Indian architecture and Mughal architecture are all influenced the same way. So we've seen it sort of show up in different ways. The most impressive Vastu-like homes that I've seen were in Pompeii in Italy. So, the volcano exploded and buried the town, but Ercolano and Pompeii, as you visit these homes, they're all, square homes or rectangular homes with an open courtyard, which is the exact type of home that I found in India in rural areas where they still have concentric walls, a central courtyard, and collecting rainwater in that center. So that's kind of interesting to see in semi-recent Italy versus ancient India.
So, yeah, so you saw, I'll share my screen here. So here is one project that we're working on, custom home coming up. The bottom of the page for our viewers is the back of the house. So that would be facing not necessarily directly south, but it's facing south on the lot. And the top of the page is facing north. So what were your thoughts as you were looking at these plans, and how would this work in with the Vastu architecture?
So in Vastu, rectangles are always preferred. And what I want to understand is, what is the actual overall lot lie? Is a lot rectangular as well?
Yeah, it's right. It's long and narrow. So a lot of lots around here are like when you're going out into the country, rural areas, there's 2 acre lots. So they are, I can't remember the exact footage, but it's basically not much wider than the house, right? So maybe another 20 feet on either side of the house, but then there's a lot of front yard and a lot of backyard. And then we have to factor in septic and so forth. So in this case, the septic will go in the front. So we push the house back, put the septic in the front, and then they don't have any rear neighbors. So they have a nice forest and privacy in the backyard.
So the basic concept in Vastu is to first, choose a good lot, obviously, and the lot should be as rectangular as possible. And when the lot is rectangular, you want to know what are the cardinal directions, and you hope that the lot is aligned with the cardinal directions. So, one edge of the lot is, north, east, south, west. And then you want to build the home, again, congruent with the lot direction. So let's say it's a cardinal lot, and one side faces north, and then you build the house sort of crooked to that. That would be sort of energetically not as flowing as if the house is aligned with the cardinal directions. So you want an east wall, a south wall, a north wall, or like you want walls in cardinal directions. The other thing is that each of the directions has a sort of connotation with a different element. So just like Ayurveda, we talked about fire and air and earth. The water element is the northeast always. So if you want a water tank or a water supply or a fountain, the northeast is the place to put water elements. The southeast of the house is usually the fire element. And so if you want to align with fire element, that's a good place to put fire things. So kitchens, computers, electronics, cars, having internal combustion engines, the southeast is considered good for fire element. And, like a garage, for instance, would be good there. The southwest is the earth element. So the south, and all I'm saying is you draw a quadrant of the property. What is north, what is east, south, and west? And those four quadrants, you want those elements to be represented. So for instance, southwest, earth element, earth is related to storage. You can have storerooms, pantries, heavier items, any kind of heavy bulkiness is usually in the southwest. And then air element is the northwest. And so that's where you want more space. So you want to build with more space to the northwest, more space to the north, more space to the west, if possible. And the northeast is considered the direction where prosperity flows into a lot and a home from. So the northeast corner of your plot, the northeast corner of your home, and the northeast corner of a room or the northeast corner of your desk should never, ever, ever have any clutter. It should be a clutter-free area. So
I don't know if I passed that. I think my whole desk is cluttered here. You can't see it, but
yeah, just draw a line down the northeast
yeah.
corner, no clutter, because that's where you want prosperity to flow in from. And so you want to make that area clear. So typically a Vastu home would have even more windows in the northeast. So the north wall and the east wall could have a lot of windows to allow the energy to flow in. Even the lot elevation can be lower on the northeast to allow that energy to flow in. Now, once the energy, good energy and prosperity flows in, the southwest, you don't want it to lose it. So it comes in the northeast, you don't want to lose it from the southwest. So the southwest, you want to block it somehow. So if you have a higher fence, the southwest is a good place to put a higher fence. If you have heavier walls, the southwest is a place to put those. Any kind of heavier furniture or bracing or anything, southwest is good. Or the land sloping upwards to the southwest helps that energy sort of stay in. So these are like the basic concepts. And of course, if that's not available, then there's ways to adjust that and mitigate those factors. Like, let's say you have a northeast and you don't have a lot of windows, so you can't flow in, you can add a little fountain or water element there, and that allows that energy to flow, even if you don't have the ability to put the windows there because of heating and cooling requirements, for instance, right?
Yeah. So, and that's the issue with building here where we are is that we don't, at least in passive house building, for example, or net zero, or some sort of sustainable, green, energy efficient building, we're typically trying to minimize the amount of windows on the north side
Mm-hmm.
because we can't necessarily get any heat gain from it if we were hoping to use the sun as that. Now, that being said, we've done houses with a lot of windows facing north and so forth, but we typically warn the homeowners that look, the window is the weak point of your wall assembly. So it will, or there is a possibility that this will be colder just because, the window only performs so well. So at the same time, though, we don't necessarily want a whole lot of windows on the south if we can't block the sun in the summer, right? So we have the extreme weathers where, yes, we don't want the sun coming in the summer months, but we do want it in the winter months, hence why we work with overhangs and so forth, and the sun rising and dropping throughout the seasons. So some of this might not necessarily work with what's best for energy efficiency. So are you saying that there would be elements that you could use to kind of offset those energies?
Yeah, I mean, the whole science of Vastu is about tapping the natural energies of our planet and our situation, right? And so, as Vastu made it to China, they modified it to make Feng Shui for the Chinese environment. And so, same thing as we migrate to the Western environment, as let's say the Canadian environment, you have to adjust for the natural energies. And what are the natural energies? Well, the sun rises and sets at a different time in Canada, a time of day than it did in India, 3,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago. So you have to, the fact that you're already thinking about where's the sun come in, how does the sun heat, that already is being conscious with Vastu because it's about understanding the natural energies. And so, the sun rises in the east. And so that's a direction that typically in Vastu, you want to have entrances and windows. So you greet the morning sun, and the morning sun is considered to give a lot of creativity and energy to the home. And so, if you built a home with no windows on the east facing wall, I think people would, naturally would be like, I'm not sure about this. And I think the reason is because that's the direction the sun rises, right?
Right.
Whereas if you had a wall along the south with no windows, people would be less offended, right? They would, because they wouldn't notice it because the sun rises, east to west. So there's ways to sort of, again, understanding what people's natural tendencies and needs are, what is the natural movement of the sun, and what are the different heat loads and depending on time of year. But one thing I would say definitely in Vastu is to be very conscious of the center point of the structure and the center point of the land. So if you were to find the exact central point of the land and the central point of the structure, they should never overlap. So the center is considered the space element. And so you want there to be a good amount of space wherever that center is. So if it's possible, the center of the home should be open. That's not where you put a big heavy staircase right in the exact center line of the home. So if you're to take the east, one wall and the other wall and draw the center line, if you put something heavy there, it sort of defies against the space element need. So I said there was water in the northeast, fire in the southeast, earth in the southwest, air in the northwest, space is in the middle. And so you want space in the middle. So you don't want the center of the structure and the center of the land to overlap. And then you want the center of the home to just be open. And, like a lot of times in open floor plan, they naturally keep the center quite open. And it feels very airy and feels very light in the home. So that's one that I noticed. And the other thing I noticed looking at the drawing was the bedrooms. So typically a master bedroom is very good in the south and the southeast, southwest, because that's the area of stability. And the head of the family, the master bedroom, is the stable point of the home. But you never want the bed in such an orientation that your head is facing north. So they say that there's a magnetism of the earth and there's sort of the north energy, the North Pole. If you align your body in that direction, it sort of can disturb sleep a lot. So the most ideal
Interesting.
position for your head to face is south, but east and west is also okay. And so I noticed in one of the drawings that all the bedrooms were designed in such a way that the head is facing north. And if the person is sensitive to sleep, they'll notice they'll have trouble sleeping in that orientation. And of course, wherever you place the bed is typically where you decide to put the door. And I noticed that typically in most home designs, you put the door kind of, away from the foot of the bed.
Right. That's interesting. I'm going to do some more research. This has obviously tweaked my interest. So, but we've already been going almost an hour. Like I said, I think we need 10 episodes to kind of get through everything that I would like to talk to. So we'll get you back on here as well. But one of the things that I do want to share too is that, well, once again, here's the book, Business Casual Yogi. Highly recommend it. Vish is sending me some signed copies of the book. So we worked out that. So we're going to be giving away some books. We started it last week and when I spoke for Union Meditation Studio, my wife's studio, and we kind of started a giveaway there. And we're going to be sending a book to Debbie. Actually, this is the first time we're announcing that. So we're going to, once we get that, we'll get the book to her. And I want to do the same thing here. So anybody who's watching this, listening to this, share it, like it, send it. Anybody who shares it and likes it, we'll pick somebody and we'll reach out, we'll get your information, and we will send you a signed copy of the Business Casual Yogi, which I highly recommend. In either case, I'm sure it's on audio as well if somebody wanted to listen to it. And where's the best place to go to find the book or get in touch with you, Vish?
So the book is available on Amazon, and Amazon Canada has it, and they'll ship it within a couple of days, I think. And I'm also on Instagram as the Business Casual Yogi. I have Facebook, the Business Casual Yogi. I'm on LinkedIn. There's a website, businesscasualyogi.com, to learn about the book. And I've got behind the scenes videos on each chapter. So if you want to learn about sort of the drama that went on behind the chapter, I share it there. And then the book, also I have my own business website, which is Head and Heart Insights. That's my coaching business. I do executive coaching and small business coaching, and obviously incorporating, best practice management as well as the yoga, Ayurveda, and ancient Indian wisdom tradition. So yeah, I'd be honored if you found me online. And Casey, if people are getting, sending you information that they qualify for the giveaway, if you let me know their name, I'll make sure to sign to that name. So at least the first few respondents will have a personalized signed copy of the book.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. I'll send those to you. I'll send you in an email for sure. Did you have any requests or asks of the people who are
Yeah, I'd say go out and get the book. Definitely get the book and read it. I think you'll find it, very transformational for your life. It is a book that makes all of this complicated stuff a lot more simple and accessible, and in a way that you can incorporate into your daily life. And just follow me on Instagram or Facebook. I'd love to keep in touch. I'm posting all sorts of tips and techniques and bits of philosophy and wisdom as I go, and so that's where you can find a lot of that.
Is there an audiobook? Can you get it on Audible or anything like that?
No, there's not an audiobook yet. It's been in the works, but haven't pulled the trigger on it yet. So right now it's available on Kindle or the paper copy. And I recommend the paper copy because you want to probably take notes in it. There's worksheets and workbooks in the book itself that you'll want to write in and as you go through it and go through that journey.
Yes, I have lots of highlighting marks in my book.
Okay, good. I am working on launching a Business Casual Yogi coaching program. It hasn't been fully announced, but I'll share it with you and your listeners, which is basically a coaching transformation program over 14 weeks where I work with you from a point of view of executive coaching, business coaching, Ayurveda assessment, giving you a customized yoga routine based on your type of constitution and type of work that you do. I also do an astrology analysis. I'm also trained in the Vedic astrology system, which is understanding the different planetary energies and influences on your life. Something I was very skeptical about as an engineer, but now I've come to understand and realize that it actually is extremely accurate and predictable and powerful. And it uses a different set of math than Western astrology, which is why I think I was negative on it for so long. We're mathematical people. So I kind of combine all of these different Vedic tools to sort of help you transform your life and your business. And so that'll be coming soon. So I'm just giving you guys a heads up.
That's amazing. Well, Vish, thank you so much for putting all the work into this and putting it out there and sharing your wisdom and experience. It's already having an effect on me, and I hope that we can help you reach many more people. So thank you so much. And thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Casey. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for tuning in and listening, and really enjoyed being on the show with you. All right. Have a good rest of your day.
All right. As a reminder to get a signed copy of the Business Casual Yogi by Vish, this book right here, like and share this video, and we will choose a winner 7 days from now, which is on the 16th of June. We will be choosing a winner, and we will be sending the book to a signed copy of the book to that person.
Mom! Mommy! Mommy!
That's my daughter calling.
Mommy!
This is a great way to do a site visit, isn't it, Casey?
It's a COVID site visit.